Hello everyone, I'm Santiago, and today I'm gonna be testing Monster Hunter World on the GeForce GTX 1050 Ti. I'll be doing 1080p, 900p and 720p. To skip to those sections of the video, check the timestamps down in the description. I'll first show you the G4560 on 1080p targeting 30 frames per second, so I'll try to be over 30 frames per second as much as possible. Then I'll lower the resolution to 720p to see if we can maintain 60 frames per second with this CPU, and unfortunately that's when you see the difference with the i3-8100. When you're trying to target 60 frames per second, the G4560 can usually drop into the mid-40s, and you'll see that the GPU usage drops. That doesn't happen as much on the i3-8100, so in this case, this is where you see the difference. If you're trying to play at 30, the G4560 is enough. Then I'll switch to the i3-8100 and I'll show you 1080p targeting 50 to 60 frames per second. Then I'll just crank up the settings trying to stay over 30 frames per second, and then I'll do the same on 900p and 720p, and that'll be about it. From the options menu, the options that gave me the biggest performance hit, first of all, was volume rendering quality. That option destroyed performance for me, so by just turning it off, you get a massive FPS boost compared to the highest setting. If you still want this effect to be on your game, I recommend using the low option. It wasn't a huge visual difference, at least in my opinion, so just avoid anything over low with this option unless you have a lot of GPU power to spare. Then the other option is LOD bias. This option also kills performance. It's pretty much the draw distance option, the level of detail, so the lower this is, the more pop in you'll see. From high to medium there is a massive FPS difference, then from medium to low it isn't as big of a difference, but it's still noticeable. So this is the other thing that I would just lower from high to medium in most cases. It's a very noticeable difference. As an example, in a 1050 Ti, if you put this on medium and the volume rendering quality on low, you can put everything else maxed out and you play the game over 30 frames per second, but without it, it will be just below 30 all the time. So this option is very important. Then ambient occlusion should also be an impact in performance, but for this and LOD bias, you need to go back into the main menu in order to change it, which is very disappointing. If you turn off screen space reflections and soft surface scattering, there should be a good difference in performance as well, but it's not as big of a difference in performance like on the other options. And then the SH diffuse quality, which I'm not sure what it is, but it seems to be related how the filtering on the shadows is handled. If this is wrong, please let me know in the comments so I can correct it. Also made a difference in performance, especially from high to medium, and you can tweak it on the fly, which is always good. And the seed pre-pass option, which is the last one, just by keeping this on, you get a good FPS boost, so don't disable this option, just keep it enabled. And for some reason the shadow quality option didn't make a difference in performance for me, maybe 1 or 2 frames from the highest to the lowest, so I recommend just keeping the shadow quality maxed out. The visual difference in my opinion is not worth it, and you get like 1 or 2 frames at the most. And then the other options I didn't mention, just lower them in groups, and that should give you a small improvement in performance, depending on what hardware you have. And on the CPU side of things, Capcom already said that this game was very CPU bound, but it was different than I was expecting. Yeah, 4-core CPUs or lower are maxed out a very long amount of time, but I started seeing a difference on different GPUs. If you're playing on a 1050 Ti, if you want to play at 60 frames per second, you have to use very reduced settings in order to do so. In that case, the i3-8100, a quad-core CPU, is enough to maintain 60 frames per second, but if you jump to a 1060, when you have higher settings and 60 frames per second, if you tweak it correctly, in order to maintain 60s all the time, you'll need an i5-8400 because the i3 cannot handle it. It goes at 100% and the game drops into the mid-50s. Still playable, of course, but the CPU does make a difference in that case. But a G4560 was enough to maintain 30 frames per second in all cases. So if you want to play at 30, a 2-core 4-thread CPU should be enough. G4560, G5400, i3-7100, something like that. What I really like about this is that unlike other CPU intensive games, this doesn't stutter, even with a 2-core 4-thread CPU. So in my opinion that's very important, but still the draw distances and all that kind of stuff left me a little disappointed considering how much CPU and GPU it uses. But at the moment this is how it runs, so thank you guys for watching and see you next time.
If I get to the campsite first, or if you're lost, open up your map or use your scout flies to track me. Whenever you leave the base without signing up for a quest, you'll go on an expedition. There's no time limit or cap on how many times you're allowed to faint, which means you can...
interesting. Let's report our findings to everyone at the resource center when we get back.
site first, or if you're lost. Open up your map or use your scout flies to track me. Whenever you leave the base without signing up for a quest, you'll go on an expedition. There's no time limit or cap on how many times you're allowed to faint, which means you can explore to your heart's content.